In 1966, on a lonely stretch of highway near Parkersburg, West Virginia, a man named Woodrow Derenberger was stopped by something impossible. A strange craft, a smiling figure, words that arrived without sound. His name was Indrid Cold, and he would return. But Cold was only the beginning. As the weeks passed, reports of unidentified lights, strange visitors, and unexplained phone calls spread across the Ohio Valley. In nearby Point Pleasant, a creature with burning red eyes was seen lurking in the dark. Some claimed these events were connected, that Cold knew more than he let on. And then the stories evolved. Indrid Cold became more than just a visitor from the unknown. He became the Grinning Man, a figure whispered about in hushed tones, an entity said to appear in times of chaos. Some believed he was an extraterrestrial. Others saw him as a harbinger, a watcher from the shadows. A single encounter became a legend, and that legend has never stopped growing. It was the evening of November 2nd, 1966, a cold, drizzly night in West Virginia. Woodrow "Woody" Derenberger, a 50-year-old traveling salesman, was driving home along Interstate 77 toward Parkersburg after a long day of work. The highway was quiet, save for the steady sweep of his windshield wipers. Then, headlights appeared behind him, approaching fast. A vehicle swung around to pass, then cut sharply in front of his truck, forcing him to stop. At first, Woody thought it was a distressed motorist or a police stop, but the object before him was unlike any car or truck he'd ever seen. It resembled the chimney of a kerosene lamp, 30 to 40 feet long, with a bulging center and flared ends. It hovered a foot above the pavement, silent except for a faint fluttering sound. Rain dripped from its smooth, metallic grey surface. As Woody stared, frozen, a door swung open. A tall man stepped out into the rain. He moved with deliberate grace, shutting the hatch behind him with a solid thunk. In the dim light, Woody could make out a strikingly human-looking figure, about 6 feet tall, with dark, slicked-back hair and an unnaturally deep tan for a November night. He was dressed in a reflective blue coat that gleamed in Woody's headlights, with a dark suit underneath. But it wasn't his clothing that unsettled Woody. It was his expression. The man's mouth was fixed in a broad, frozen grin, as if his face had been stretched into permanent amusement. Then Woody heard a voice, yet the man's lips never moved. "I was very frightened," Woody later recalled. "And as far as I can understand, this was all mental. There were no spoken words. I knew what he was asking me, but his lips did not move." The stranger communicated telepathically. He reassured Woody, stating in a calm, measured tone, "My name is Cold. I am a searcher." The two engaged in an unbelievable conversation on that empty stretch of road. Cold asked Woody simple, almost childlike questions. His tone was polite, but unsettlingly detached. He inquired about Woody's hometown, his work, and even the glowing lights in the distance. Woody explained that the glow came from Parkersburg, a city where people lived and worked. Cold pondered this, then offered an odd detail about himself. "Where I come from, we call those gatherings." He went on to describe his people in familiar terms. "We eat, we breathe, we sleep, we bleed, even as you do." He added cryptically that his world was not nearly as powerful as yours. For 10 minutes, Woody and the Grinning Man stood in the rain, one speaking aloud, the other projecting words straight into Woody's mind. Throughout the exchange, Cold's eerie, unwavering grin never faltered. Then, as suddenly as he had arrived, Cold prepared to leave. Before turning back toward his craft, he left Woody with a final parting phrase. "We will see you in time." A promise, a warning, or something deeper about time itself. Cold turned and stepped aboard the floating craft. A hand from inside reached out to help him up. The door shut behind him with a low hum. Then, in a flash, the object lifted from the road and shot into the night sky, vanishing into the rain-soaked clouds. Woody sat in stunned silence, gripping the wheel. The red glow of his taillights reflected off the empty pavement. His heart pounded, his breathing steadied. The peculiar craft and its grinning emissary were gone. Still trembling, Woody sped home to Mineral Wells. He burst through the door, drenched and pale, and immediately called the police to report what had happened. Within hours, officers arrived at the house to take his statement. They found him visibly shaken, but unwavering. "I met a man from another world," he insisted. By morning, the bizarre story had spread across Parkersburg. The very next day, November 3rd, 1966, Woody made an extraordinary decision. He would go public. At 4 p.m., he appeared live on WTAP TV, recounting every detail of his meeting with Indrid Cold. For 30 minutes, he sat under the bright studio lights, visibly rattled, yet determined, describing the metallic grey craft, the grinning man, and the telepathic exchange. The interview set off a frenzy. For nearly 3 weeks, local newspapers ran stories on the Derenberger incident. Reports flooded in from residents claiming to have seen strange lights in the sky near Interstate 77. One elderly man confessed he had seen a tall, smiling figure waving down cars, but had been too terrified to stop. A farmer phoned in about a low-flying object streaking toward Parkersburg that same night. Police, and even the Air Force, took note. The public response was split. Some saw Derenberger as a sincere man who had encountered something extraordinary. To them, Indrid Cold was an extraterrestrial envoy, perhaps even an ambassador from a more advanced civilization. The idea that a UFO had landed in West Virginia fit neatly into the broader wave of high strangeness sweeping the region, including the first reports of the Mothman just 2 weeks later. Others dismissed the story outright. Skeptics suggested Woody had misidentified a normal aircraft, suffered a hallucination, or simply fabricated the event. Local police admitted they had no physical evidence, no scorched pavement, no radar blips, only Woody's word and the corroborating witness reports of strange lights that night. Yet, in time, more sightings emerged. Journalist John Keel traveled to Parkersburg, interviewing Derenberger and other locals who claimed to have encountered a grinning man. A family in Ohio reported a strange figure near their farm. A teenage girl in Point Pleasant described waking to find a broad-shouldered man grinning at her in the darkness before he vanished. As the months passed, Indrid Cold was no longer just one man's experience. He was becoming a phenomenon. His name slipped into UFO journals and whispered conversations, joining the ranks of the Men in Black, Mothman, and other eerie figures in America's growing catalogue of unexplained mysteries. By the end of 1966, Indrid Cold had entered folklore. A grinning man, emerging from the rain with an unsettling smile, speaking without words, and departing with an open-ended promise, "We will see you in time." What began as one man's inexplicable meeting had become one of the great modern legends of the unknown, one that even today refuses to fade. For Woody Derenberger, that eerie night on Interstate 77 was only the beginning. In the weeks and months after, Indrid Cold kept his word, returning again and again. Sometimes Cold appeared at Derenberger's farmhouse door, smiling and addressing Woody by name. Other times, his voice whispered in Woody's mind, communicating telepathically. No matter the hour, Cold's tone remained calm, inquisitive. He asked simple questions about life on Earth, always reassuring. "Do not be afraid, we only wish you happiness." Derenberger's claims grew more astonishing. Cold was not alone. He sometimes arrived with other silent, grinning men. These, Woody learned, were his crew from Lanulos, just as polite and curious as Cold himself. In early 1967, as skeptical neighbors watched, Derenberger claimed Cold invited him on a journey beyond Earth. Woody said he was taken aboard a spacecraft and brought to Cold's home planet Lanulos in the Ganymede galaxy. What he reported was astounding. Lanulos was a utopia, lush, peaceful, with no war, no poverty. The Lanulosians eschewed clothing, living innocently and without shame. They aged slowly, living 125 to 175 years. Cold even spoke of having a family of his own back on Lanulos. As these fantastical details emerged, Indrid Cold's tale expanded from a roadside meeting into an interstellar saga. With each retelling, Cold became something more. No longer just a strange man in the rain, but a cosmic emissary. His cryptic words, calling cities gatherings, claiming he came from a place less powerful than yours, hinted at a being human-like, yet profoundly different. Cold's perpetual grin and measured demeanor were unsettling, yet oddly comforting. Some in the UFO community saw parallels to earlier contactee stories, while skeptics rolled their eyes. As Woody went public with his claims of space travel and alien councils, ridicule intensified. Yet he never backed down. The spotlight turned harsh. Woody was now both famous and ostracized. His farm besieged by curious trespassers and skeptical reporters. Law enforcement and Air Force representatives took notes, but no evidence surfaced. Derenberger swore his encounters were real. What some dismissed as a hallucination or fabrication was becoming something larger, a sprawling intergalactic mystery stretching from West Virginia to the distant stars. Even as Derenberger's tale unfolded, a wave of high strangeness swept West Virginia. Just 2 weeks later, on November 15, 1966, residents of Point Pleasant began seeing a winged humanoid with glowing red eyes, soon known as Mothman. Lights appeared in the sky. Mysterious visitors knocked on doors. The region felt under siege by the unknown. John A. Keel, a journalist and UFO investigator, arrived from New York. While following Mothman reports, he discovered Derenberger's story, a grinning man just 50 miles away. The timing was too strange to ignore. In early 1967, Keel interviewed Derenberger at length, documenting his claims of Indrid Cold's continued visits and his voyages to Lanulos. Keel was intrigued, if not entirely convinced. Here was a grinning alien speaking of peace, while just down the river, a terrifying creature with burning red eyes was lurking in the dark. To Keel, these events weren't isolated, they were connected. As he dug deeper, more oddities emerged. Locals whispered of intimidating men in black harassing UFO witnesses. Strange, metallic-sounding phone calls delivered cryptic messages. Keel himself received chilling, late-night calls from a mechanical voice claiming to be Indrid Cold. In one case, Cold's supposed voice even predicted a disaster, a prophecy some later linked to the Silver Bridge collapse of December 1967. Keel saw these pieces not as coincidences, but as a grander phenomenon. He documented his findings in his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, cementing Indrid Cold as a permanent figure in paranormal lore. Though he never claimed Cold was Mothman, Keel suggested both were facets of the same mystery, each a signpost along the road of high strangeness. Over time, the lines blurred. Cold's name became synonymous with Mothman, even though their stories were distinct. When Hollywood adapted the Mothman prophecies in 2002, they reinvented Indrid Cold as a shadowy force, an eerie prophetic voice over the telephone. This dramatic portrayal permanently linked Cold to Mothman in the public imagination. Without Keel's investigative zeal, Indrid Cold might have faded into obscurity. Instead, he became a staple of UFO mythology, the human-like counterpoint to Point Pleasant's monstrous legend. Yet Indrid Cold wasn't the only grinning man. Just weeks before Derenberger's encounter, in October 1966, a chilling event occurred in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Two teenage boys, James Yanchaitis and Martin Mouse Munoz, were walking home when they noticed a tall figure lurking behind a chain-link fence. He was bald, over 6 feet tall, and dressed in a metallic green suit. But what terrified them most? His face. He was staring directly at them, his wide grin stretched from ear to ear. The boys froze in fear. Then the grinning man took a step toward them. That was enough. They ran for their lives. The encounter circulated in newspapers and UFO reports. At the same time, strange lights were seen in the New Jersey sky. Some wondered if this grinning stranger had arrived from a UFO. The timing was eerie. This was just weeks before Indrid Cold officially entered the public record. As these stories spread, public perception merged them. The smiling figure in New Jersey, the nighttime visitor in Point Pleasant, and the highway stranger in Parkersburg all became one archetype. By the late 1960s, the grinning man was cemented in UFO folklore. Investigators like Keel even speculated that there might be a whole race of them. Some theorized Cold and his kind were related to the Men in Black, human-like, but subtly wrong, appearing near UFO events to observe or manipulate witnesses. Indrid Cold's story began to intersect with other UFO legends as well. Among the most curious comparisons is Valiant Thor, an alleged extraterrestrial said to have met with US officials in the late 1950s. According to UFO lore, Valiant Thor arrived near Washington, D.C. in 1957 and was allegedly granted an audience with President Eisenhower and military officials. Described as tall, dark-haired and telepathic, Thor was said to have offered advanced knowledge and urged world leaders to abandon nuclear weapons. In the years that followed, some UFO researchers couldn't help but notice the striking similarities between Thor and Indrid Cold. Both figures were eerily human, yet subtly off, well-dressed, polite, and always composed. Both spoke of peace, knowledge, and an advanced civilization beyond Earth. And in both cases, their existence relied almost entirely on personal testimony. Thor's from Frank Strange's, a UFO investigator who claimed to have met him, and Cold's from Woodrow Derenberger. This led to speculation. Could Indrid Cold and Valiant Thor be the same being, appearing under different names? Some suggested Cold was Thor operating in the shadows, interacting not with world leaders but with everyday people. Others believed both were members of a greater extraterrestrial presence, agents of peace sent to different corners of humanity. There is no hard evidence linking the two, but their stories became intertwined in UFO circles, adding yet another layer to the mystery of Indrid Cold. In time, Indrid Cold was no longer just a single entity. He had become a category of being. The legend kept evolving. Indrid Cold's grin was never destined to stand alone. In the months and years after Woodrow Derenberger's 1966 encounter, his story expanded. Cold, it turned out, was not a solitary visitor. He was part of something larger. Over time, new names emerged in the legend: Carl Ardo, Demo Hassan, Connor, and Conrad. In interviews and in his 1971 book, Visitors from Lanulos, Derenberger claimed Cold had companions from his world, including Carl Ardo and Demo Hassan, who had also come to Earth. Connor and Conrad, however, surfaced primarily in family accounts, passed down among the Derenbergers rather than appearing in UFO literature. Some researchers list Carl Ardo and Demo Hassan as part of Cold's group, while Connor and Conrad remain less widely documented. Yet all versions of the story agree on one thing: Indrid Cold was never alone. From West Virginia backroads to the pages of Derenberger's diary, Carl Ardo became a central figure in Woody's later accounts. Derenberger described him as Cold's companion, another grinning man from Lanulos who often accompanied Indrid on Earth. Woody later claimed that Carl Ardo had been present during his first encounter, reaching out a hand from Cold's craft. Like Indrid, Carl spoke telepathically, discussing philosophy, human civilization, and cosmic mysteries. He even visited Woody's home, sometimes appearing on his porch for hours, calmly discussing the nature of existence. Derenberger maintained that Carl Ardo and Indrid Cold arrived together in a glowing craft, inviting him aboard for incredible journeys. According to Woody, Carl was there when Cold showed him the ship's interior, and he was present the night Derenberger was taken beyond Earth. Derenberger's most extraordinary claim, later chronicled in Visitors from Lanulos, was that Cold's crew had taken him on a journey across the cosmos. According to Woody, Carl Ardo was not just an observer, but an active part of Cold's mission. Derenberger described being whisked away aboard Cold's craft, with Carl and others as his guides. They allegedly took him on aerial journeys across Earth, stopping in South America's Amazon jungle, then traveling to a base on the Moon before reaching Lanulos, a planet Cold described as a peaceful civilization free from war and suffering. While Carl Ardo featured prominently in these accounts, Demo Hassan remained elusive. Derenberger recalled Cold mentioning Demo Hassan, but there were no detailed stories of his interactions. Some speculated that Demo Hassan was a misunderstanding, perhaps a coded phrase mistaken for a name. Regardless, his inclusion added another layer of mystery. While Derenberger went public with Cold's visits, his family also came forward. Woody's wife and children claimed they had met Cold and his crew firsthand. Tanya Derenberger, Woody's daughter, later recalled that Indrid Cold was no myth to their family. He was a frequent visitor. She insisted that Indrid and his companions came not just for her father, but for all of them. Unlike Carl and Demo, Connor and Conrad appeared mainly in family lore. Tanya said her family knew these Lanulosian visitors on a first-name basis, as though they were an extended intergalactic family. Unlike Carl and Demo, who were discussed in UFO circles, Connor and Conrad were rarely mentioned in newspapers or investigative reports. They lived in the Derenbergers' private history, a secret known only to those who grew up in its shadow. In 2017, Tanya Derenberger published Beyond Lanulos, continuing her father's story. She maintained that Indrid Cold was still alive, that he and his people remained in contact with her family, even decades later. The legend of Indrid Cold, she insisted, was not an event of the past, but an ongoing saga, one that quietly persisted through letters, phone calls, and telepathic messages away from public view. To the Derenbergers, Carl Ardo, Connor, Conrad, and even Demo Hassan were not fiction. They were friends from another world, each with a name, a personality, and a role in the Indrid Cold Chronicle. Such astonishing claims invite inevitable skepticism. Who, or what, were Indrid Cold's companions? Believers argue that Cold's crew was exactly what Derenberger claimed, a team of explorers from Lanulos, quietly observing Earth. Cold may have been a scout, with Carl Ardo as his second-in-command, and Connor and Conrad as his children or kin. Skeptics counter that Cold's companions were a later embellishment. Derenberger faced intense media scrutiny, and as time went on, his story grew increasingly elaborate. Some see this as a hallmark of UFO contactee cases, where initial encounters evolve into rich, novel-like sagas as public interest grows. The Men in Black theory adds another dimension. Some researchers suggest that Carl Ardo and Cold's crew resembled classic Men in Black encounters. Mysterious, otherworldly figures appearing after UFO sightings. Some even wondered, could Indrid Cold himself have been a variation of the Men in Black? John Keel himself noted Cold's uncanny similarities to MIB lore. his odd formal speech, his dark suit, and his tendency to arrive after UFO events. Some witnesses even claimed that a black Volkswagen pulled up outside Woody's home, and a tan-skinned man in a dark suit spoke with him before disappearing. Was Carl Ardo an MIB, or was Cold part of a larger, coordinated presence? The Cold crew remains an enduring mystery. Whether they were fellow explorers, a fabricated embellishment, or something else entirely, their presence has deepened the legend of Indrid Cold. We return to that grinning figure on a West Virginia road, but now he is not alone. He is flanked in the shadows by others: Carl Ardo, Connor, Conrad, and the phantom Demo Hassan. They stand together in the rain, their unnerving smiles illuminated by the glow of an unknown craft. If they were real, what did they want? If they were invented, why does the memory of their name still send a shiver down the spine? In the absence of answers, the story of Indrid Cold's companions remains suspended between worlds, a legend that invites belief, skepticism, and speculation in equal measure. The mystery deepens, drawing us further into the unfolding myth, even as solid conclusions remain elusive. And as long as Indrid Cold's smile lingers in the dark, we are left to wonder if his crew still walks among us. Woodrow Derenberger never backed down from his tale. In the face of ridicule, he repeated his encounter with Indrid Cold time and again. In 1971, he published Visitors from La Nulos, expanding his account with even more astonishing claims. He described being taken to Cold's home planet, detailing their ongoing friendship. The media mocked him, but Woody remained steadfast. This happened, he insisted. John A. Keel, the seasoned UFO investigator, contributed a foreword. While not endorsing the surreal details, Keel attested to Woody's sincerity. He sincerely believes that these things happened to him. To Keel, Derenberger was no hoaxer, but a man willing to face scorn and isolation to share his truth. Woody's devotion to his story came at a heavy price. The media frenzy invaded his home. His wife, Catherine, tried to endure the scrutiny, but the constant reporters, phone calls, and trespassers wore her down. Eventually, she left Woody, taking their children. His small farmhouse in Mineral Wells became a spectacle, attracting armed thrill-seekers who camped out, hoping to glimpse Cold's spaceship. His daughter Taunia recalled being terrified at night, men lurking in the trees, waiting for something to appear. Even changing phone numbers didn't stop the harassing calls, sometimes threats, other times static-filled beeps, as if something beyond human was listening in. Under the pressure, Woody's life unraveled. Friends distanced themselves. Work became scarce. Local gossip never faded. Migraines and depression overtook him. In 1967, he even vanished for a time, later claiming Indrid Cold had taken him away. When he returned, his marriage was over. Seeking anonymity, he left town, escaping the spotlight that had burned his life so badly. Yet Woody never recanted. Not when people called him crazy, not when his family fell apart, not even when his children cried over the strange phone calls and prowlers in the dark. Until his dying day, he stood by his story. For years, Indrid Cold's tale lived on as a whispered legend in West Virginia. But for the Derenberger family, it was never just a story. It was their reality. 50 years after that night on the highway, Taunia Derenberger Bowman emerged to ensure the legend would not fade. Taunia insisted Cold was real, not a hallucination or a hoax. She claimed he remained in their lives for decades, even speaking with her personally. To Taunia, Indrid Cold didn't vanish. He simply stepped out of the limelight. After reports of Indrid's death in a fiery crash, Taunia even suggested Cold may still be alive today, somewhere beyond the stars. Taunia's decision to revisit Cold's story was not welcomed by all. Some relatives had buried the past, wanting no part in reopening old wounds. They remembered the gossip, the unwanted attention, the knocks on their door at all hours. But to Taunia, beyond Lanulos was not about fame or hysteria. It was about telling the truth as her family lived it. Her stories paint a deeply personal picture. A late-night phone call from Indrid Cold asking about a sick sibling. A comforting thought projected into her mind when she felt alone. A mysterious figure watching over their farm during a thunderstorm. Whether one accepts her words as fact or belief, there is no denying her conviction. In the end, Indrid Cold was more than a local legend. He defined the Derenberger family's destiny. Woody went to his grave defending his story, and Taunia made it her mission to carry it forward. To the world, Cold remains a mystery. To the Derenbergers, he was a presence that never left. And as Taunia's story continues, the grinning man from Lanulos still looms in the background, a reminder that some encounters leave footprints that last for generations. Since that cold, rainy night in 1966, Indrid Cold has slipped from an eerie roadside encounter into modern folklore. His name is now synonymous with the Grinning Man, a humanoid apparition defined by an unnaturally wide, frozen smile. Witnesses have described Cold's inhumanly large grin and strange, almost but not quite human demeanor in hushed tones, as if recounting a bad dream. Over time, he has evolved into an archetype, a reflection of our enduring fascination with the unknown. Cold's unsettling smile and human-like presence place him among a pantheon of mysterious visitors. The Grinning Man was no longer just one individual. He was a type of being, appearing wherever the unexplained surfaced. Yet as Cold's legend spread, skepticism followed. Some dismissed the Grinning Man as modern myth, a fusion of UFO hysteria, folklore, and embellishment. Cold appeared just as Mothman mania gripped West Virginia when imaginations were primed for monsters. Psychologists suggest that when confronted with the truly unknown, the mind fills in the gaps with familiar imagery. Perhaps Cold's uncanny grin was the result of this phenomenon. Still, the legend refuses to fade. Journalists and researchers continue to mention Indrid Cold alongside other unexplained entities. The sheer consistency of details from eyewitnesses, the fixed grin, the awkward speech or telepathy, the sensation of encountering something almost human but not quite, gives even skeptics pause. In paranormal lore, Cold has transcended hoax or hallucination. He has become symbolic, a representation of the eerie feeling that something is watching, smiling, waiting. After 1966, sightings of grinning, wide-mouthed figures began to emerge nationwide. Throughout the late 60s and 70s, witnesses whispered about encounters with a grinning entity lurking near UFO sightings, phone calls, and poltergeist activity. Some awoke to find a man with a grotesque smile watching them from the shadows, only for him to vanish when the lights came on. Others reported strange voices on the phone, laughing, speaking in sing-song tones, or taunting those who had gone public with UFO sightings. These stories rarely made front-page news, but as they piled up, a pattern emerged. By the time John Keel published the Mothman prophecies in 1975, the idea of a grinning figure appearing alongside UFOs and hauntings had firmly taken root. Some wondered if these were all the same entity, an intelligence appearing again and again, assuming different forms. Others theorized that Indrid Cold was not one being, but a species roaming Earth with identical eerie smiles. By the 1990s and 2000s, the internet revived the Grinning Man, turning him into a bona fide urban legend. Early creepypasta stories and online horror forums borrowed elements from Cold's legend: the reflective blue or green suit, the telepathic speech, the eerie promise, "We will see you again." Soon, teenagers swapping ghost stories spoke of a grinning man seen on lonely highways, peering into bedroom windows on rainy nights. In one viral Reddit story, a driver described being trailed by a tall figure in a gleaming suit, watching him from the rearview mirror with a smile that never wavered. Indrid Cold had evolved from a local legend into an internet phenomenon, inspiring fan art, horror blogs, podcasts, and Halloween costumes. He became a fixture in late-night radio shows, whispered about in forums dedicated to the unexplained. But Cold's archetype is older than the 1960s. Folklorists argue that the grinning, inhuman stranger predates the space age. In Victorian England, there was Spring-Heeled Jack, a fire-breathing, red-eyed phantom said to terrorize Londoners in the 1830s, appearing suddenly and vanishing just as quickly. A century later, in 1944 Illinois, residents of Mattoon were gripped by panic over a figure known as the Mad Gasser, a shadowy prowler who sprayed gas through bedroom windows, paralyzing victims. He was never caught. Historians now see the Mad Gasser of Mattoon as mass hysteria, a wartime nightmare born from fear and imagination. Spring-Heeled Jack, the Mad Gasser, the Grinning Man, all variations of the same archetype. Each generation produces its own version of the unsettling stranger. The names and appearances change. A Victorian demon with spring boots, a wartime gas-spraying phantom, a UFO-trailing grinning man in a metallic suit. But the core remains the same. The mysterious figure emerges from the dark, smiling uninvited, offering no clear motive. He appears, sparks terror, headlines and theories, then vanishes, leaving behind only questions. Indrid Cold, then, is simply the most modern incarnation of this timeless figure. Perhaps this is why the Grinning Man endures. Psychologists argue that he taps into a deep-seated fear of the stranger, something that looks human but isn't quite right. His too wide smile and unblinking stare trigger the uncanny valley effect, the brain's instinctive discomfort with something almost human, yet disturbingly off. Folklorists compare him to trickster figures in myth, beings who arrive to test, deceive, or enlighten. Even his name, Indrid Cold, holds intrigue. Cold evokes fear, distance, the unnatural. Some have even linked Indrid to Old Norse meanings, suggesting a hidden significance. Ultimately, Indrid Cold is both a mystery and a metaphor. Fact or fiction, his story compels us because it doesn't answer the questions it raises. If a smiling man approached you in the dark, would you run? Would you listen to what he had to say? Though Indrid Cold's tale began in the 1960s, reports of the eerie, smiling man have surfaced in later decades, keeping the legend alive. In 2009, a blogger described passing a tall, grinning figure on a highway near Roswell, New Mexico, a sighting reminiscent of Cold's classic profile. More recently, in 2021, a woman in upstate New York encountered a Mothman-like creature before receiving mysterious phone calls from an entity identifying itself as Indrid Cold. Speaking in a clipped, teeth-gritting tone, the caller warned, "You didn't see a thing." The woman, unfamiliar with Cold's lore, left investigators unnerved by the use of his infamous name in such a threatening context. Across modern accounts, patterns emerge. Witnesses describe a tall, oddly dressed man with an unnaturally wide grin, appearing out of nowhere and communicating telepathically. Sightings often coincide with other paranormal events, UFOs, cryptids, phantom lights. In the New York case, Cold's phone call followed a Mothman sighting, mirroring his 1960s appearances in West Virginia's Mothman Flap. Reports range from the southwest to the northeast, yet West Virginia remains central to the lore. Local legends claim Cold still roams the back roads, his relentless smile intact. Whether truth or myth, each new report adds another thread to the mystery, keeping enthusiasts watching the skies and the roads for his return. Cold's influence has also woven into pop culture. In the 2002 film The Mothman Prophecies, a Cold-inspired character is depicted as an ominous, disembodied voice delivering cryptic prophecies. This reimagining cemented Cold's legend on the big screen. Books like Keel's The Mothman Prophecies, 1975, and Derenberger's Visitors from Lanulos, 1971, first chronicled his tale, while newer works continue to explore his story. Taunia's memoir provided updates on her family's post-1966 experiences, bridging Cold's legend into the modern age. Beyond books and film, Cold thrives in digital media. Podcasts, television specials, and online paranormal forums frequently revisit his mystery. Dozens of paranormal-themed podcasts, from UFO investigations to horror stories, have explored Cold's case. Some even interviewed members of the Derenberger family, sharing anecdotes about Indrid, the alien friend who chatted in their living room. In television, Cold's name surfaces in paranormal docu-series. The 2019 series Hellier followed investigators exploring Appalachian mysteries, including an interview with Taunia Derenberger, who reaffirmed Cold's ultra-terrestrial presence. Such programs illustrate Cold's role as a connective thread, linking classic UFO folklore with modern investigations. Even gaming has acknowledged Indrid Cold. In 2023, Fallout 76, set in West Virginia, introduced a random event character known as the Smiling Man, explicitly tied to Cold's legend. The character wears an old-fashioned suit, speaks in cryptic phrases, and disappears in a puff of smoke when attacked, mirroring Cold's elusive reputation. His inclusion in a mainstream game shows how Cold has transitioned from regional legend to global pop culture, appearing in wikis, strategy guides, fan art, and even online horror fiction. Over time, interpretations of Indrid Cold have multiplied, evolving with those who study and retell his story. In the late 1960s, ufologists saw Cold as a classic alien contactee case, a being from Lanulos who came to Earth with peaceful curiosity. Derenberger's account reinforced this view, as Cold introduced himself politely, claimed to mean no harm, and allegedly took Woody to his home planet. In these early theories, Cold was optimistic, a space brother from an advanced civilization, selecting a humble salesman to deliver a message of understanding. Some UFO researchers still treat Cold as a genuine extraterrestrial visitor, citing his connection to UFO sightings and telepathic communications. However, John Keel later expanded the theory, speculating Cold might be an ultra-terrestrial, not a literal spaceman, but an entity capable of slipping between dimensions. Many modern paranormal investigators adopt this view, placing Cold within high strangeness alongside Mothman, the Men in Black, and other anomalies. Indeed, some suggest Cold may be linked to MIB law, a shapeshifter or agent ensuring paranormal events remain obscured. In the 2021 New York case, Cold allegedly warned a witness to forget what she saw, acting more like an enforcer than the friendly interrogator Derenberger met. These darker interpretations cast Cold as a trickster, an unseen force maintaining secrecy around the unexplained. Folklorists and horror enthusiasts, however, lean into Cold's eerie ambiguity. He is often grouped with black-eyed kids, the Slender Man, and other modern boogeymen, a faceless, smiling entity lurking at the edges of reality. A viral 2012 Reddit post titled "The Smiling Man" described a grinning, dancing figure stalking a lone pedestrian, never named as Indrid Cold, yet bearing uncanny similarities. This creepypasta further cemented Cold's presence in internet horror, blending fact with fiction until the lines blurred completely. Today, Cold is both an alien visitor and an urban legend, his story malleable to those who tell it. Some believe he foretold the 1967 Silver Bridge disaster, tying him to prophecy. Others wonder if Cold and Mothman were one and the same, their differing forms, facets of the same intelligence. Conspiracy theorists offer another spin, suggesting Cold was a psyop, an Air Force experiment in psychological warfare, or a fabricated distraction from real covert projects. While lacking hard evidence, these theories show how Cold's myth shifts to fit new narratives. What's certain is that Indrid Cold's legend has endured. Over nearly 60 years, he has transformed from a small-town mystery into a global phenomenon. As one commentator put it, Cold has evolved from a local legend to an internet icon, inspiring creepypasta, artwork, and countless discussions. Different groups keep different facets alive. UFO buffs focus on Cold's spacecraft, folklorists track his place in roadside encounters, while horror fans know him only as the eerie Grinning Man who appears in the dark. Each retelling adds another layer to the myth, ensuring Cold never truly disappears. Far from fading, he continues to adapt, his smile appearing in new places, his presence shifting with each new generation. Perhaps that is Cold's greatest mystery. He is both fact and folklore, both legend and ghost, always watching, always waiting, and always smiling. Indrid Cold began as a fleeting encounter on a lonely highway, a name murmured under the glow of a truck's headlights in 1966. But like all great legends, he refused to stay in one place. His story spread, transformed and grew, no longer just the account of Woodrow Derenberger, but a mystery woven into UFO lore, conspiracy theories, and horror stories alike. Fact and fiction merged, leaving behind a tale that is both history and myth, memory and imagination. Cold was many things to many people. To some, he was an interstellar visitor, a watchful presence who spoke of peace and distant worlds. To others, he was an archetype, a trickster or omen, a reflection of our deepest fears about the unknown. His grin still lingers at the edge of our perception, appearing in forums, films, whispers on the wind, a phantom that refuses to fade. Some mysteries demand answers. Others exist to remind us that the unknown is still out there, watching, waiting, and sometimes smiling back.